Rob, for because the GTX nomenclature and the Satellite and the RoadRunner, they were around for like a little while. What was the deal with all the names? Like the RoadRunner at the time, like well, I'll let you answer before I.
Yeah, it's often confusing to people because all of those cars shared the same body style. Every generation, they looked exactly the same. So when you're talking about a GTX or a Roadrunner or a Satellite or a Belvedere, they all look the same except for trim and what's under the hood, pretty much. And I can't really account for why Plymouth always did it that way, but it started with the Belvedere in the 50s, which was originally a trim line of the, oh dear, what was the car called? The Plymouth, wow, I'm having like a brain
I know
hemorrhage.
this.
It was the Plymouth.
We'll have to Google it.
It's like Plymouth, like
I was thinking something else.
Cranberry or something, but it's not Cranberry. But
I
anyway,
just have the Mr. Belvedere theme running through.
If you guys know the answer, drop the answer in the comment section below.
And send me an email and tell me what a dope I am for being an automotive journalist and for getting something like this. But anyway, the Belvedere is really the genesis of all of these cars, and it began as a trim line in the 50s, and then it became so popular that Plymouth made it its own distinct model in their lineup. And as time wore on, they realized they wanted to do performance versions of the Belvedere. So they started doing trim lines under the Belvedere name that represented different levels of performance and or luxury. And that's out of that came the RoadRunner, which was aimed at a very low price performance car. You could basically get the same drivetrain that you had in a GTX in a RoadRunner and spend a couple $1,000s less because it had crappy, cloth seats instead of coming, with leather or at least vinyl standard. And the RoadRunner never had all the options like for power accessories and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, just the name alone and like the logos and everything, you just look at who they were marketing to, right? It's a cartoon.
Yeah, cartoon. Yeah, they were aiming for hot rodders, and I'm not sure, my point being is I'm not sure who the GTX was aimed at. Because here was a car that came standard with a 440 Super Commando. The only two optional engines in it were the 440 six-pack and the Hemi. And yet you could get that car with power, everything, air conditioning. Well, not on the Hemi, but you could get air conditioning. You could get all these niceties that no one in their right mind who wanted to go fast would add to a car because it's heavy. All of that stuff adds weight. So it makes sense when you realize that the GTX was ultimately just a failure, and that of the two trim levels of the Belvedere, the RoadRunner was the successful one, because if you want to go fast, make it simple, make it light, make it cheap. And people ate RoadRunners up. And that's why today, if you take let's say a 70, 69, 70, 71 RoadRunner, any of those cars, and put it against an equivalent condition GTX, the GTX is going to fetch a whole hell of a lot more money at auction, let's say, even if the drivetrain's exactly the same on both cars, because they made tons of RoadRunners and sold tons of RoadRunners, but they couldn't give GTXs away. So they're a much rarer car now.
It's interesting because like when you examine the other manufacturers, right, of the big three, they all kind of do similar things, like especially GM, right? GM has like multiple brands and they all share a chassis and they make design changes on the exterior, but underneath they're all similar. Yeah. But Chrysler is unique in that way, right? So they don't do that, and that like all three of those share the same platform, but the styling is essentially the same. It's just like they have different names, but it's the name of the package, right? It's kind of weird.
They were essentially trim levels of the same car, but by 1971, they were bespoke, separate models in the lineup that all shared the same body. And that's weird to me. I mean,
exactly, yeah.
You know, I could understand if by, you know, in 70, 71, if it was still a Belvedere, which it wasn't because they had gotten rid of the Belvedere name.
Well, GTX sounds so much cooler.
Yeah. If it was all a Belvedere and the Satellite was your low-end trim and your RoadRunner was your mid-level trim and your GTX was your high-level trim, I could understand all three of those cars looking the same. But that's not the case. They were literally three separate models that had trim levels underneath them. You know, it was a very weird thing to do. Even in cases for like when Mopar would share a drivetrain and a chassis across brands. Like, let's talk about the E-body cars of 77 through 74. You had the Challenger for Dodge and the Plymouth and the Cuda for Plymouth. They were essentially the same exact car mechanically. The wheelbase was a little different. The overall length of the car was different. But under the skin, it was the same exact engines offered, the same exact differentials, the same transmissions, yet they were called something completely different.
Right, but the Cuda was just much better, right?
They just look.
But we've seen that. We've seen that in a lot of cars before and since.
Well, that was my point.
Not this weird Dodge. We're gonna make the exact same car with three different names.
And that's largely why it didn't work out for them, right? I mean, they were trying something new. I don't know.
GTX went the way of the dodo, as I said. After
hey, what does GTX stand for, by the way, Rob? Do you know?
Nothing.
It just sounds cool.
Sounds cool.
Grand Touring Extreme.
Extreme. No, it doesn't. As far as I know, it doesn't stand for anything.